Section 0 of The Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Algy Pug. Note: in issuing The Growth of Love, the publisher has desired to set forth the high estimate recently come to be held regarding the poetry of Mr. Robert Bridges. To do this effectually, no more fitting introduction could have been given than the contribution by Mr. Lionel Johnson, to be found in the Century Guild Hobby Horse, October 1891, and here reprinted entire. It was, and is almost as inaccessible as one of Mr. Bridges' privately printed pamphlets. It only remains to say that this reprint was made direct from a copy of the original Growth of Love, of which 100 copies in Fell's Old English type, foolscap quarto, were put forth from the private press of Rev. H. Daniel, Oxford, 1890. The punctuation, or rather the lack of it, has been literally followed. The half-title immediately following the sonnets is that of the original title page, while the printer's device at the end of the book is also reproduced in facsimile from this unique edition. Only 50 copies of this large paper edition, post quarto, have been printed, 10 of which are on Japan vellum, and 40 on Van Gelder's handmade paper, each copy numbered, and the type distributed. Copy number 5. The Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. Printed for Thomas B. Mosher and published by him at 37 Exchange Street, Portland, Maine, 1894. The Poems of Mr. Bridges. A Brief and General Consideration. By Lionel Johnson. The supreme duties of the artist toward his art, as of all students toward their studies, are two in number, but of one kind: a duty of reverence, of fidelity, of understanding toward the old great masters, and a duty of reverence, of fidelity, of understanding toward the living age and the living artists. But that our age lives well, and that our artists live well, who shall assure us? Life, its energies and its activities, ourselves can recognize, but we require a touchstone and a test, some image of that perfect state which lieth in the heavens, seen there by Plato, eternal in the heavens, proclaimed by Paul, before we can accept with joy, and follow with readiness, the ways of our living age, of our living artists. Here, too, we have a double duty, one to the past and one to the present. If we fulfil it, then we cannot lack the necessary test or standard whereby to assay ourselves and others. In the first place, securus judicat orbis terrarum. Sure and sound is the whole world's judgment. In Sophocles and in Virgil, in Dante and in Milton, virtue and truth shine clearly. The general voice of men, the more authoritative voice of artists and of students, go together in praise of the old great masters. But they lived in their times, we live now. What have we to do with them? Neither did the old great masters flourish together. Yet examine, I pray you, the debt of Virgil to Homer, the debt of Dante to Virgil, the debt of Milton to Homer, to Virgil and to Dante. Do you not find it an inestimable debt of reverence, of fidelity, and of understanding? Or can you discover in those masters any sign of a servile obedience to each other? Call it rather, not a debt due, but a grace sought and received. Be we artists then, or students merely, let us judge ourselves and our age, let us value ourselves and our age, according to the mind of the great masters and in their spirit. In the second place, at one with our test by antique excellence, is the test by our proper conscience. There are occasions in our work when we say, with a confidence beyond expression, this is right. Against textbook and precept, warning and exhortation, we know our work to be true. And while the pedant, with a mechanical reverence, in a blind fidelity, through a dulled understanding, quotes against us his Aristotle, his Vitruvius, his Pope, his Reynolds, we know that we are their dutiful sons, not he, that what we do, following our conscience and our light, is in the spirit and in the truth of what they did, following theirs. And your lawless profaner of art, your ignorant contemner of the past, will he not say as much? Well, such a one may lie indeed, and let him look to his conscience. He will find there a witness to his profanity and to his ignorance. He will confess that he has not meditated the great past, nor the fine tradition, that the old masters were loyalists, himself a rebel, they bent upon a rational development, he upon a mindless innovation, they true to the constitutions of art, he careless for their violation. As in the spiritual or interior life, the Church would have a man perfect himself by the help of approved rules and meditations, not superseding but directing his conscience, so in art, which also has its interior life, the general wisdom of the great masters must help to nourish and to strengthen that conscience, which cannot thrive wholly upon the desires and the intimations of its own genius. If we regard such men as Spenser and as Sidney in Elizabethan times, or as Mr. Whitman in our own, we find not their greatness nor their felicity to lie in the attempt to compose English verse in the ancient metres of Greece and Rome, nor in the attempt to rob English verse of all metrical law. It is upon these principles, thus briefly declared, that I purpose to estimate, if it may be, the poems of a living poet, one standing, in point of time, between Mr. Symonds and Mr. Lang, or between Mr. Dobson and Mr. Gosse, one standing, in place of honour, by the judgment of Mr. Robinson Ellis, second only to Mr. Swinburne as an Oxford poet. I will not consider the degree of excellence indicated by that position. Suffice it to say that the eminent reader in Latin at the University of Oxford intended to confer upon our poet, Mr. Bridges, a great measure of his approbation and of his praise. Were we to reckon the number of Mr. Bridges' performances by the number of works bearing his name, in an historical or chronological list, we would do him a wrong. He is not one of those writers whose writings comprise no small part of their own libraries. Such a list would give the names of some 17 volumes, including small pamphlets and the products of a private press. The earliest volume would be recorded under the year 1873, the latest under the year 1891. But of these 17 works, published during these 18 years, many are, so to say, the writer's anthologies, or deliberate collections chosen from the earlier volumes together with new matter. Indeed, the lover of excellence in English literature must often have felt a passing vexation, a shade of annoyance. So difficult has he found the search for many rare choice poems, either sacrificed by Mr. Bridges' careful conscience, or hidden away by him in editions hard to procure. Yet it may be thought that this touch of antiquity, the need for this exhilarating bibliomania, adds something pleasant to the study of Mr. Bridges. We have so many popular poets and popular editions of their collected works, that retirement, leisure, anxiety, in a living poet, are virtues the more estimable and distinguished. They are virtues, no less, to be emulated and respected by a critic, and in considering Mr. Bridges' poems, I shall say nothing about those which he has, in the full exercise of his judgment, cast away. Litera scripta manet. They are indestructible, and cannot escape the antiquary. So far as they deserve to be sought out and remembered, posterity would do well to annul the over-rigorous sentence of Mr. Bridges. For the present, let it stand. The poems of Mr. Bridges are of the lyrical kind, of the narrative, and of the dramatic. And before examining each kind apart, let me say something applicable to the whole of them, in greater or less degree. These poems, then, represent, with much else that is admirable, the scholarship of poetry, a certain erudite air of mastery over the secrets of rhythm and of metre, a trained skill in music and in those delicate devices which give so excellent a distinction to the older English poets. To whatever Mr. Bridges set his hand, he preserves discretion and propriety, the scholar's instinct, no less than the poet's, making it impossible for him to outrage fine taste by the fantastic freaks of some great men amongst us. At the present time, so he tells us with lamentable truth, men seem to affect to have outgrown the rules of art. But he, at least, reverencing the great masters, makes an attempt to work in their manner. Not that he is a slavish follower of the great masters, their captive rather than their votarist. At times he may have fallen somewhat into that attitude, but not for long. It is not characteristic of him. It is his characteristic virtue that he moulds his thought, guides his imagination, into fresh and living forms with a scholarly knowledge of what has been done before him, in like manner, though not in the same. Thus some among his poems are noticeable for their boldness of metrical experiment and invention, but we can trust him who wrote those two good treatises on the prosody of Paradise Regained and Samson Agonistes, and on the elements of Milton's blank verse in Paradise Lost. The invention may displease us, the experiment prove unhappy, yet we recognise a justifiable enterprise, a scholar's venture, not the frantic impertinence of one writing in despair of nature and in contempt of art. And this learned competence, so abundant in his form, is naturally abundant in his matter. For matter and form, to repeat a simple and neglected truth, are inseparable. Mr. Bridges is not enamoured of a new thing for its novelty. His thoughts are his own thoughts, but his expression of them is in harmony with the matured wisdom of many ages, meditating the common human things with gravity or in gladness. That is Horace, we say, or Catullus. There is Theognis or Meleager. And here is Marvell, here Vaughan, here Herrick. And this brings Landor to mind, Landor or Collins, or Wordsworth. And now Shakespeare, now Terence, now Fletcher comes across us, with elder Athenian spirits. Yet the final outcome is no mere freshened memory of old greatness and delights, but a recognition of the true and living poet in Mr. Bridges, who thus delicately preserves for modern use an antique charm. Delicately, in a generous appreciation of ancient excellences, and with a full sense of all that they can do, to help him also on the hard way to an honourable perfection. So the passion of his verse is an ardent and an austere passion, filled with the ardours and the austerities of a mind that enjoys with reverence, almost with fear and trembling, the joys of art and nature, the true savour of them, their decent comeliness and admired grace. I love all beauteous things, I seek and adore them. God hath no better praise, and man, in his hasty days, is honoured for them. I too will something make, and joy in the making, although to-morrow it seem like the empty words of a dream, remembered on waking. Mr. Bridges published his first book of poems in 1873, a pamphlet of verse in 1879, and another in 1880. A fourth volume issued in 1884 from the private press of Mr. Daniel, Fellow and Bursar of Worcester College, Oxford, reprinting some of the earlier poems. In 1890 appeared The Shorter Poems of Robert Bridges, of which the first three parts are mainly reprints from the former collections, whilst the last part is wholly new. In 1890 also came, from Mr. Daniel's excellent press, a book of sonnets, The Growth of Love. Some of these had already been published. Apart from the lyrical portions of his dramatic poems, this is the sum of Mr. Bridges' lyrics, and for our present purpose we need consider but the shorter poems and the growth of love. The shorter poems, the ripe harvest of Mr. Bridges' labours, are 78 in number. To state a general truth, we may determine the spirit and beauty of them to be meditative in two fashions. Either these lyrics show forth the powerful charm of life in its natural air, upon its natural ground, the stir and the silence, the change and the endurance of this natural world, working upon the contemplative mind; or they express the contemplative mind dwelling upon its proper works and business, of reason and of art, of thought and of aspiration, in the light of nature and of man's place in nature. The two aspects are harmonious, and much extravagance of life and of thought has come of ignoring their harmony. Have we not wearied ourselves, many a time, over the reproaches and the sorrows of those who, as it were, go up into the mountain alone, but rather to weep than to pray or to keep silence? And there are those who weary us with the ceaseless agitation of their active life and thoughts. Crowds are round about them, noise is their music. They quote us their Terence, homo sum, as though Terence would have them turn the universe into a committee room for universal talk. The posture of Mr. Bridges' mind, displayed in these poems, is rather that of those earlier poets, Elizabethans and Jacobeans, to whom the world looked half a court of grave observances and half a cloister of delights, and their service, in either kind, a service of solemnity and of elegance together. Only by some such phrase can I express that dainty and cheerful spirit of pleasure which makes the sacred verse of Marvell, or of Herrick, of Ben Jonson, or of Crawshaw sound like the strain of rich music at a feast, where all is gracious and entirely to be relished. It is an excellent view of life, which looks upon the world as a chamber of God, where what is secular is eternal, what is spiritual is ideal, and all good, fine things are the ornaments and garniture of an eternal spirit immanent there. I find something of this view in all great poetry. Lucretius cannot obscure it. Tibi suaveis dedla tellus submittit flores, tibi riden equora ponti placitumque nitet diffuso lumine coelum. In Pope, or in Gray, an exquisite refinement of taste and workmanship declares their love of a pleasing order among things. Keats, once clear from the prodigalities of youth, is great in virtue of it. Wordsworth is magnificent in praise of it, for what does he ascribe to duty for an office and a grace? Flowers laugh before thee on their beds, and fragrance in thy footing treads. Thou dost preserve the stars from wrong, and the most ancient heavens, through thee, are fresh and strong. Arnold, by dwelling with such serenity of mind upon the great things thought and done in the world, and with such gladness of heart upon the seemliness and the strength of nature, helped us to an appreciation of this view. Newman, in all his perfect expression of life's real unity and concord, in all his lamentation, so like to Milton's, over the breaking of that fair music and divine consent, taught us the same enduring truth. Mr. Pater, realizing, with so singular a delight of intellect, the qualities of all admirable things and natures, loves to call them hieratic, or precise, or comely. He follows the ritual order of human life and of human thought. Nay, come to the greatest things. What is the theology of the Church Catholic but the patient and adoring science of God, guarded from wild dreams, grounded upon divine sanctions? But in our day men love to think of themselves as lost in the world, homeless in the universe. Each wandering fancy is fashioned into a lyrical cry. Without meditation, without reverence, without patience, they utter and would have us hear their disconnected and uncertain thoughts. They have no habitual, no constant principles of thought, no test, no standard of judgment, Loose sentiment and lawless imagination are the signs to them of free and fearless genius. So, the form of poetry being inseparable from its matter, this random and unconsidered matter is expressed in forms devoid of all scholarship and all proportion. Poetry is degraded to a mechanical trick of recording immediate impressions or vagrant fancies. It is one main source of our pleasure in reading these shorter poems that not the slightest of them is thus trivial and mean. Modern they are, of our own day, but their romance of tone is classical, their meditative quality is immemorial. As with states, so it is with thoughts. The poet, too, who would deal with the fresh moods and influences of his day, must cast the kingdoms old into another mould. Mark the word. Not cast them into original chaos, the land of dullness and of the dunces, but into a new mould, a fresh form and feature, no less precise of design than were the former. For an example, compare Mr. Bridges' Spring, Invitation to the Country, and his Spring, Reply, with Randolph's Ode to Master Anthony Stafford, and with Cotton's Retirement, Stons Irréguliers, to Mr. Isaac Walton. Or go farther back, into a greater antiquity. Read again Martial, Ad Licinianum de Hispaniae Locis, or Horace, Ad Virgilium, and see how this living poet can once more play upon the old theme of life's aspect and of life's virtue, in town and country, in winter and in spring. Or make another comparison. Read Campion's rich and moving verses, When thou must home to shades of underground, and there arrive, a new admired guest, the beauteous spirits do engirt thee round, white Iope, blithe Helen, and the rest, to hear stories of thy finished love from that smooth tongue whose music hell can move. Then wilt thou speak of banqueting delights, of masques and revels which sweet youth did make, of tourneys and great challenges of knights, and all those triumphs for thy beauty's sake. When thou hast told these honours done to thee, then tell, oh tell, how thou didst murder me. The classic romantic splendour and beauty of that, so full of Propertian fire and Spenserian solemnity, cannot escape you. Now read Mr. Bridges' Elegy on a Lady, whom grief for the death of her betrothed killed. I must mutilate it by quotation. It thus concludes. But now for many days the dewy grass has shown no markings of his feet at morn, and watching, she has seen no shadow pass the moonlit walk, and heard no music borne upon her ear forlorn. In vain has she looked out to greet him. He has not come. He will not come, alas! So let us bear her out to where she must meet him. Now to the river bank the priests are come. The bark is ready to receive its freight. Let some prepare her place therein, and some embark the litter with its slender weight. The rest stand by in state, and sing her a safe passage over, while she is oared across to her new home, into the arms of her expectant lover. And thou, O lover, that art on the watch, where, on the banks of the forgetful streams, the pale indifferent ghosts wander, and snatch the sweeter moments of their broken dreams, thou, when the torchlight gleams, when thou shalt see the slow procession, and when thine ears the fitful music catch, rejoice, for thou art near to thy possession. Arnold, we find, is not the only poet of our day who, without a specious resemblance, can use the ancient symbols and imageries for the stately expression of a sorrow. But this power of true assimilation is rare enough, and not to be had but by patient study, educating a native sense for the distinctions of art. A thorough consideration of Mr. Bridges' poetry would ponder long his skill in music and in metre, for in these he has something of the master's touch, and beyond the dexterity of a novice. but so full of minute and of technical scholarship is he, that a treatise were required for the exhibition of his theoretic science and actual practice. But I will say that if he err at all, it is in a certain concision and compactness, coming of too many strong monosyllables, too little tempered and relieved by words of a more prolonged melody. It is an effect, something between briskness and sprightliness, common in the less deft and versatile of Elizabethan lyrists, and unequal to occasions of great and moving beauty. Such verses are, indeed, of a pleasant tone and of a just economy. Their structure is neat and clean. They are without waste and profusion of words. But coming from Mr. Bridges, they come rather as copies of verses done in the scholar's humour, for the leisurely exercise's sake, than as the best products of his imagination. When he chooses to sing or to chant, with more of the various melody and concerted music, we regret, not without some ingratitude, his less delicate or lofty strain. In certain measures, devised with a great subtlety of accents, equal in number upon each line, but in each line prevailing over various reaches, or disposed at various intervals, Mr. Bridges has not yet attained a perfect ease, but he contrives many pleasurable effects. Witness some of the lines on a dead child. Perfect little body, without fault or stain on thee, with promise of strength and manhood full and fair. Though cold and stark and bare, the bloom and charm of life doth awhile remain on thee. And again, so quiet, doth the change content thee? Death, whither hath he taken thee? To a world, do I think, that writes the disaster of this, the vision of which I miss, who weep for the body, and wish but to warm thee and awaken thee? Ah, little at best can all our hopes avail us to lift this sorrow, or cheer us, when in the dark, unwilling, alone we embark, and the things we have seen and have known and have heard of fail us. But those who wish to study the metrical achievements of Mr. Bridges in various kinds had best read his comedy, The Feast of Bacchus, written in English six-stressed verse, his Eden, an oratorio set to music by Mr. Villiers Stanford, the choral parts of his play, Achilles in Skyros, to name but these. Besides the shorter poems, the volume of 79 sonnets, entitled The Growth of Love, is of noticeable beauty. It may be thought, in point of mental and imaginative strength, his finest work. Unlike most sonnets of our time, these sonnets are weighty with close thoughts, and rich with images, in the Shakespearean and in Milton's ways, yet not obscure nor luxuriant in the less happy manner of Rossetti, and their substance is congruous with the form. Each grave or exalting thought finds within the limits of the 14 lines an exact place for it to fill. So Petrarch conceived the sonnet, and so Sidney. I present one at random. The dark and serious angel, who so long vexed his immortal strength in charge of me, hath smiled for joy, and fled in liberty to take his pastime with the peerless throng. Oft had I done his noble keeping wrong, wounding his heart to wonder what might be God's purpose in a soul of such degree. And there he had left me, but for mandate strong. But seeing thee with me now, his task at close he knoweth, and wherefore he was bid to stay and work confusion of so many foes. The thanks he looks to have from me I pay, yet some great heavenly envy as he goes unto what great reward I cannot say. The narrative poem, Eros and Psyche, published in 1885, is one of those versions in which Apuleius has been simply followed. It is written in graceful stanzas of 7 lines, and is dedicated, in significant terms, to the celestial spirit of Henry Purcell by an unworthy lover. This poem is in no sense a translation, Indeed, Mr. Bridges has a note in which he speaks of the substitution of Hellenism for Latin vulgarity, somewhat to the consternation of the present writer, who is equally surprised at reading of the dull furniture of Apuleius. The poem is a felicitous piece of fancy, embellished with many devices, but the lover of Apuleius will prefer the miraculous rendering by Mr. Pater. Nowhere in Mr. Bridges' poem is there so perfect a phrase as that of the craftsman, divine or half divine, who by the subtlety of his art had breathed so wild a soul into the silver. Qui magnae artis subtilitate tantum efferavit argentum. Mr. Bridges' poem has the same degree of excellence that has Mr. Lang's Helen of Troy, but it can hardly claim an higher place, for all its ready invention and its grace of scholarship. Prometheus the Fire-giver, a spectacle in the Greek manner, was first printed in the year 1883 by Mr. Daniel, and at a public press in 1884. Nero, the Feast of Bacchus, Palissio, Return of Ulysses, the Christian Captives, Achilles in Skyros, have followed Prometheus. It is here that I can best dwell upon another distinction of Mr. Bridges as a poetical craftsman. That he is no contemner of the past has been said, but he is also, as appears from his works, a very careful searcher into the literary fashions, tastes, habits, adventures of the old craftsmen. Men of letters, and poets above all, are in these days content to know little about such matters, to have a general view of Sophocles and of Shakespeare, but to be extremely ignorant of Calderon and of Alfieri, to know much of Milton, but nothing of Vondel, much of Lessing, but nothing of Opitz, to read Spenser and Chaucer and Dryden, but not Browne, nor Gower, nor Cowley. And who shall say that to know the great masters is not the first necessity of an artist? Yet we might think that a true man of letters would eagerly explore all tracts and byways of literature, all tentative methods and forsaken aims of his predecessors. In the other arts this apathy less prevails. We have with us still those who are willing to study the old Italian tractates, to explore old music rooms, to pursue the obscure traces of all past excellence. Mr. Bridges, whilst displaying throughout his work a loving familiarity with both old and foreign literature, seems, if I may make the conjecture, to have studied with especial care the spectacular and the musical history of the stage, to know wherein precisely consists the virtue of any dramatic form at a given period. Thus, in his Feast of Bacchus, he has done in English what no one else has done. He has given us the very soul and body of Terence, with the ghost of the lost and shadowy Menander. Such a study is, he sings, a winter-tide's employment. Then oft I turn the page in which our country's name, spoiling the Greek of fame, shall sound in every age, or some Terentian play renew, whose excellent adjusted folds betray how once Menander went. In all his plays he exhibits a just conception of his subject and of its treatment. He knows when to catch the spirit of the Italian Renaissance or of the Spanish school, when to plan his chorus in the austere manner of Milton or with something of Shelley's brilliance, when the Sophoclean tone is in season and when that of Euripides. What degree of licence is permissible in handling classic matters after the Elizabethan way? In all that he is never at a loss. His plays are quick-witted, ingenious, facile, although his dexterous craftsmanship rarely enables him to make the dramatic form embody the high dramatic spirit. All that he writes in dramatic form we enjoy. It is infinitely skilful and attractive. But for a power essentially, pre-eminently dramatic, we look to the one English dramatist of greatness now living, to Michael Field. Mr. Bridges gives us the humour of the drama, its various attendant charms and graces, not without a real and an original force, but in his lyrics he is perfectly fine. Briefly and generally, I have touched upon the characteristic virtues, as I see them, of this excellent poet, rather indicating than attempting to expound his peculiar charm. It is a limited charm, not that it is one liable to decay with time, or to pass with the reader's passing moods, but it is limited in the sense that this poetry, in all its simplicity, in all its skill, is too dainty a thing for common use. Unlike the poems of Arnold, or of Wordsworth, of Virgil, or of Keats, of Milton, or of Goethe, they cannot be read daily and in all places. That is test of great poetry, its abiding and unfailing power upon us because of its indifference to time and place. A line of Virgil, written by the Bay of Naples in some most private hour of meditation, all those long years ago, comes home to us as though it were our own thought. Upon each repetition, experience has made it more true and touching. Or take some verse of Arnold, written at Oxford or in London some few years past. It comes home to us as though 1,000 years had pondered it and found it true. And in beauty, in power of music and of phrase, the great poets are all contemporaries. An eternal beauty is upon the great works of art, as though they were from everlasting. Poets of exquisite charm, true to their art, true to its traditions, full of its inner spirit, may still miss that final grace and grandeur. And of these Mr. Bridges is, in my poor judgment, the most admirable in recent times. Had a friend been reading Herrick to me, or Catullus, were I lying in the gardens of New College in Oxford, or in Winchester Meads, did some one play to me a fugue of Bach, I might at this hour rate the shorter poems of Robert Bridges far higher than my conscience, unperverted by delights, will suffer me. For they are poems, unaffected and simple, yet with an air of dainty luxury about them, free from all trivial show and glitter, yet not commanding and compelling us by their intrinsic greatness. Read England's Helicon, or Mr. Palgrave's Anthology of English Lyrics. Neither book contains one page of absolutely bad work, and either contains a vast deal that is very good. We might, with reason, grow enthusiastic over these delightful pages, but then, with what a sudden revulsion of feeling, we read an ode of Milton, a lyric of Shakespeare. You meaner beauties of the night, that poorly satisfy our eyes, more by your number than your light, you common people of the skies, what are you when the sun shall rise? But in our zeal for the sun, let us not shut our eyes to the stars, for in the heavens of poetry, where now few stars perchance, not a full Pleiad, are shining, none shines more purely nor more serenely than the star of our consideration. Lionel Johnson. End of section 0. Of the Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sonnets 1 to 15. 1. They that in play can do the thing they would, having an instinct throned in reason's place, and every action hath the grace of indolence, or thoughtless hardihood. These are the best. Yet be there workmen good, who lose in earnestness control of face, or reckon means, and wrapt in effort base, reach to their ends by steps well understood. Me, whom thou sawest of late strive with the pains of one who spends his strength to rule his nerve, even as a painter breathlessly, who strains his scarcely moving hand, lest it should swerve, behold me now free from the care that stains, and master of the art I choose to serve. 2. For thou art mine, and now I am ashamed to have used means to win so pure a quist, and of my trembling fear that might have missed through very care the gold at which I aimed, and am as happy but to hear thee named as are those gentle souls by angels kissed in pictures seen leaving their marble cyst to go before the throne of grace unblamed. Nor surer am I water hath the skill to quench my thirst, or that my strength is freed in measure, grace, and motion as I will, than that to be myself is all I need for thee to be most mine. So I stand still, and save to taste my joy, no more take heed. 3. The whole world now is but the minister of thee to me. I see no other scheme but universal love from timeless dream waking to thee his joy's interpreter. I walk around, and in the fields confer of love at large with tree and flower and stream, and list the lark descant upon thy theme, heaven's musical accepted worshipper. Thy smile outfaceth ill, and that old feud twixt things and me is quashed in our new truce. And nature, now dearly with thee endued, no more in shame ponders her old excuse, but quite forgets her frowns and antics rude. So kindly hath she grown to her new use. 4. The very names of things we love are dear, and sounds will gather beauty from their sense. As many a face through love's long residence groweth to fair instead of plain and sere. But when I say thy name, it hath no peer, and I suppose fortune determined thence her dower, that such beauty's excellence should have a perfect title for the ear. For I must think the adopting muses chose their sons by name, knowing none would be heard or writ so oft in all the world as those. Dan Chaucer, mighty Shakespeare, then for third the classic Milton, and to us arose Shelley, with liquid music in the word. 5. The poets were good teachers, for they taught earth had this joy, but that 'twould ever be that fortune should be perfected in me. My heart of hope dared not engage the thought. So I stood low, and now but to be caught by any self-styled lords of the age with thee vexes my modesty, lest they should see I hold them owls and peacocks, things of naught. And when we sit alone, and as I please I taste thy love's full smile, and can instate the pleasure of my kingly heart at ease, my thought swims like a ship, that with the weight of her rich burden sleeps on the infinite seas becalmed, and cannot stir her golden freight. 6. While yet we wait for spring, and from the dry and blackening east that so embitters March, well housed must watch grey fields and meadows parch, and driven dust and withering snowflake fly. Already in glimpses of the tarnished sky the sun is warm and beckons to the larch, and where the covered hazels interarch their tasselled twigs, fair beds of primrose lie. Beneath the crisp and wintry carpet hid a million buds but stay their blossoming, and trustful birds have built their nests amid the shuddering boughs, and only wait to sing till one soft shower from the south shall bid and hither tempt the pilgrim steps of spring. 7. In thee my spring of life hath bid the while a rose unfold beyond the summer's best, the mystery of joy made manifest in love's self-answering and awakening smile, whereby the lips in silence reconcile desire with peace, and pleading in arrest of passion, show the beauty left unguessed of Greece to adorn at last the Tuscan style. When first the wonder conquering faith had kenned fancy portrayed, above the strength of oath revealed of God, or light of poem penned, the countenance of ancient plighted troth twixt heaven and earth, that in one moment blend the hope of one and happiness of both. 8. For beauty, being the best of all we know, sums up the unsearchable and secret aims of nature, and on joys, whose heavenly names were never told, can form and sense bestow. And man hath sped his instinct to outgo nature in sound and shape. and daily frames much for himself to countervail his shames, building a tower above the head of woe. And never was there work for beauty found fairer than this, that she should make to cease the jarring woes that in the world abound. Nay, with his sorrow may his smiles increase, if from man's greater need beauty redound and claim his tears for homage of his peace. 9. Thus to thy beauty doth my fond heart look, that late dismayed her faithless faith forbore, and wins again her love lost in the lore of schools and script of many a learned book. For thou, what ruthless death untimely took, shalt now in better brotherhood restore, and save my battered ship, that far from shore, high on the dismal deep in tempest shook. So in despite of sorrow lately learned, I still hold true to truth, since thou art true, nor wail the woe which thou to joy hast turned. Nor come the heavenly sun and bathing blue to my life's need more splendid and unearned than hath thy gift outmatched desire and due. 10. Winter was not unkind because uncouth, his prisoned time made me a closer guest, and gave thy graciousness a warmer zest, biting all else with keen and angry tooth. And bravelier the triumphant blood of youth, mantling thy cheek, its happy home possessed, and sterner sport by day put strength to test, and custom's feast at night gave tongue to truth. Or say, hath flaunting summer a device to match our midnight revelry, that rang with steel and flame along the snow-girt ice? Or when we harked to nightingales that sang on dewy eves in spring, did they entice to gentler love than winter's icy fang? 11. There's many a would-be poet at this hour rhymes of a love and truth he never wooed, and o'er his lamp-lit desk in solitude deems that he sitteth in the Muse's bower. And while such thewless kine the fat devour, and ever grow the leaner for their food, men look askance upon an art pursued by clerks that lack the pulse and smile of power. So none of all our company, I boast, but now would mock my writing, could they see how down the right it maps a jagged coast. Seeing they hold the manlier praise to be strong hand and will, and the heart best when most 'tis sober, simple, true, and fancy-free. 12. How could I quarrel or blame you, most dear, who all thy virtues gavest and kept back none? Kindness and gentleness, truth without peer, and beauty that my fancy fed upon. Now not my life's contrition for my fault can blot that day, nor work me recompense, though I might worthily thy worth exalt, making thee long amends for short offence. For surely nowhere, love, if not in thee, are grace and truth and beauty to be found, and all my praise of these can only be a praise of thee, howe'er by thee disowned. While still thou must be mine, though far removed, and I, for one offence, no more beloved. 13. Now since to me, although by thee refused, the world is left, I shall find pleasure still. The art I have ever loved but little used will yield a world of fancies at my will. And though where'er thou goest it is from me, I, where I go, thee in my heart must bear, and what thou wert, that wilt thou ever be, my choice, my best, my loved and only fair. Farewell, yet think not such farewell a change from tenderness, though once to meet or part, but on short absence, so could sense derange, the tears have graced the greeting of my heart. There were proud drops, and had my leave to fall, not on thy pity for my pain to call. 14. When sometimes in an ancient house, where state from noble ancestry is handed on, we see but desolation through the gate, and richest heirlooms all to ruin gone. Because, maybe, some fancied shame or fear, bred of disease or melancholy fate, hath driven the owner from his rightful sphere to wander nameless save to pity or hate. What is the wreck of all he hath in fief when he that hath is wrecking? Naught is fine unto the sick, nor doth it burden grief that the house perish when the soul doth pine. Thus I my state despise, slain by a sting so slight 'twould not have hurt a meaner thing. 15. Who builds a ship must first lay down the keel of health, whereto the ribs of mirth are wed, and knit with beams and knees of strength a bed for decks of purity, her floor and seal. Upon her masts adventure, pride, and zeal to fortune's winds the sails of purpose spread, and at the prow make figured maidenhead or ride the seas and answer to the wheel. And let him deep in memory's hold have stored water of Helicon, and let him fit the needle that doth true with heaven accord. Then bid her crew, love, diligence, and wit, with justice, courage, temperance, come aboard, and at her helm the master Reason sit. End of section 1. Of the Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sonnets 16 to 30. 16. This world is unto God a work of art, of which the unaccomplished heavenly plan lives in his masterpiece, and grows with man unto perfection and success in part. The ultimate creation stayed to start from the last creature for whom all began, who, child in what he is and what he can, hath yet God's judgment and desire at heart. Knowledge denied him, and his little skill cumbered by laws he never can annul, baffled by qualities adverse and ill, with feeble hands, few years, and senses dull. His art is nature's nature, and love still makes his abode with the most beautiful. 17. Say, who be these light-headed, sunburned faces, in negligent and travel-stained array, that in the city of Dante come to-day haughtily visiting her holy places? Oh, these be noble men that hide their graces, true England's blood, her ancient glories stay, by tales of fame diverted on their way home from the rule of Oriental races. Life-trifling lions these, of gentle eyes and motion delicate, but swift to fire for honour, passionate where duty lies, most loved and loving. And they quickly tire of Florence, that she one more day denies the embrace of wife and son, of sister or sire. 18. Where San Miniato's convent from the sun at forenoon overlooked the city of flowers, I sat, and gazing on her domes and towers, called up her famous children one by one, and three who all the rest had far outdone. Mild Giotto first, who stole the morning hours, I saw, and godlike Buonarroti's powers, and Dante, gravest poet, her much wronged son. Is all this glory, I said, another's praise? Are these heroic triumphs things of old, and do I dead upon the living gaze? Or rather doth the mind that can behold the wondrous beauty of the works and days create the image that her thoughts enfold? 19. Rejoice, ye dead, where'er your spirits dwell. Rejoice that yet on earth your fame is bright, and that your names remembered day and night live on the lips of those that love you well. Rejoice, ye living, ye that now excel and guard in nameless homes the sacred light. Rejoice, though prosperous folly in her spite banish all them that from her rule rebel. For the world's exile hath a richer meed than a king's favourite. He shall arrive with the like triumph and return decreed to him, who ne'er revisited alive his home, but sang. Doubt not I shall succeed for all the hindrance they within contrive. 20. Who praiseth? If the poet have not known his work is beautiful, none can persuade. Nor doth our time, that so wrongs Handel's shade, contrive his condemnation, but its own. The comment writ on Shakespeare hath not shown the perfect judgment that alive he laid on his own work, which taketh, since 'twas made, grace nor disgrace, save but of love alone. And love, in loving nothing that is vile, knows not the error of the mind, nor fears to set his seal in secret with a smile. But oh, could one as Purcell win the tears of love, such praise were more than to beguile the learned fancies of 1,000 years. 21. The world still goeth about to show and hide, befooled of all opinion, fond of fame. But he that can do well taketh no pride, and seeth his error, undisturbed by shame. So poor's the best our longest days can do, the most so little, diligently done, so mighty is the beauty that doth woo, so vast the joy that love from love hath won. God's love to win is easy, for he loveth, desires fair attitude, nor strictly weighs the broken thing, but all alike approveth which love hath aimed at him. That is heaven's praise. And if we look for any praise on earth, 'tis in man's love, all else is nothing worth. 22. O flesh and blood, comrade to tragic pain and clownish merriment, whose sense could wake sermons in stones, and count death but an ache, all things as vanity, yet nothing vain. The world set in thy heart thy passionate strain revealed anew, but thou for man didst make nature twice natural, only to shake her kingdom with the creatures of thy brain. Lo, Shakespeare! Since thy time nature is loath to yield to art her fair supremacy. In conquering one thou hast so enriched both. What shall I say? For God, whose wise decree confirmeth all he did by all he doth, doubled his whole creation making thee. 23. I would be a bird, and straight on wings I arise and carry purpose up to the ends of the air. In calm and storm my sails I feather, and where by freezing cliffs the unransomed wreckage lies. Or strutting on hot meridian banks surprise the silence. Over plains in the moonlight bare I chase my shadow, and perch where no bird dare in tree-tops torn by fiercest winds of the skies. Poor simple birds, foolish birds, then I cry, ye pretty pictures of delight unstirred by the only joy of knowing that ye fly. Ye are not what ye are, but rather, summed in a word, the alphabet of a God's idea, and I who master it, I am the only bird. 24. O weary pilgrims, chaunting of your woe, that turn your eyes to all the peaks that shine, hailing in each the citadel divine, the which he thought to have entered long ago, until at length your feeble steps and slow falter upon the threshold of the shrine, and your hearts overburdened doubt in fine whether it be Jerusalem or no. Disheartened pilgrims, I am one of you, for having worshipped many a barren face, I scarce now greet the goal I journeyed to. I stand a pagan in the heavenly place, beneath the lamp of truth I am found untrue, and question with the glory I embrace. 25. Spring hath her own bright days of calm and peace. Her melting air, at every breath we draw, floods heart with love to praise God's gracious law. But suddenly, so short is pleasure's lease, the cold returns, the buds from growing cease, and nature's conquered face is full of awe. as now the traitorous North with icy flaw freezes the dew upon the sick lamb's fleece, and 'neath the mock sun searching everywhere rattles the crisped leaves with shivering din, so that the birds are silent with despair within the thickets, nor their armour thin will gaudy flies adventure in the air, nor any lizard sun his spotted skin. 26. Nothing is joy without thee. I can find no rapture in the first relays of spring, in songs of birds, in young buds opening, nothing inspiriting and nothing kind. For lack of thee, who once wert throned behind all beauty, like a strength where graces cling, the jewel and heart of light which everything wrestled in rivalry to hold enshrined. Ah, since thou'rt fled, and I in each fair sight the sweet occasion of my joy deplore, where shall I seek thee best, or whom invite within thy sacred temples and adore? Who shall fill thought and truth with old delight, and lead my soul in life as heretofore? 27. The work is done, and from the fingers fall the blood-warm tools that brought the labour through. The tasking eye that overrunneth all rests, and affirms there is no more to do. Now the third joy of making, the sweet flower of blessed work, bloometh in godlike spirit, and whoso plucketh holdeth for an hour the shrivelling vanity of mortal merit. And thou, my perfect work, thou'rt of to-day, to-morrow a poor and alien thing wilt be, true only should the swift life stand its stay. Therefore farewell, nor look to bide with me. Go find thy friends, if there be one to love thee. Casting thee forth, my child, I rise above thee. 28. The fabled sea-snake, old Leviathan, or else what grisly beast of scaly chine that champed the ocean wrack, and washed the brine before the new and milder days of man, had never rib, nor bray, nor swinging fan like his iron swimmer of the Clyde or Tyne, late born of golden seed, to breed a line of offspring swifter and more huge of plan. Straight is her going, for upon the sun, when once she hath looked, her path and place are plain. With tireless speed she smiteth, one by one, the shuddering seas and foams along the main. And her eased breath, when her wild race is run, roars through her nostrils like a hurricane. 29. 1,000 times hath in my heart's behoof my tongue been set, his passion to impart. 1,000 times hath my too coward heart my mouth reclosed, and fixed it to the roof. Then with such cunning hath it held aloof, 1,000 times kept silence with such art that words could do no more. Yet on thy part hath silence given 1,000 times reproof. I should be bolder, seeing I commend love that my dilatory purpose primes, but fear lest with my fears my hope should end. Nay, I would truth deny, and burn my rhymes, renew my sorrows rather than offend 1,000 times, and yet 1,000 times. 30. I travel to thee with the sun's first rays that lift the dark west and unwrap the night. I dwell beside thee when he walks the height, and fondly toward thee at his setting gaze. I wait upon thy coming, but always, dancing to meet my thoughts if they invite, thou hast outrun their longing with delight, and in my solitude dost mock my praise. I might well say 'twere better not to have been than such I am to be for such as thou. And couldst thou love me more, my heart I'd wean, and win a claim that none could disallow. But since that cannot be, O love, I lean upon thy strength, and ne'er was strong till now. End of section 2. Of the Growth of Love, by Robert Bridges. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sonnets 31 to 45. 31. My lady pleases me, and I please her. This know we both, and I besides know well wherefore I love her, and I love to tell my love, as all my loving songs aver. But what on her part could the passion stir, though 'tis more difficult for love to spell, yet can I dare divine how this befell, nor will her lips deny it if I err. She loves me first because I love her, then loves me for knowing why she should be loved, and that I love to praise her, loves again. So from her beauty both our loves are moved, and by her beauty are sustained, nor when the earth falls from the sun is this disproved. 32. In all things beautiful I cannot see her sit or stand, but love is stirred anew. 'Tis joy to watch the folds fall as they do, and all that comes is past expectancy. If she be silent, silence let it be. He who would bid her speak might sit and sue the deep-browed Phidian Jove to be untrue to his 2,000 years' solemnity. Ah, but her launched passion, when she sings, wins on the hearing like a shapen prow borne by the mastery of its urgent wings. Or if she deign her wisdom, she doth show she hath the intelligence of heavenly things, unsullied by man's mortal overthrow. 33. Thus to be humbled, 'tis that ranging pride no refuge hath, that in his castle strong brave reason sits beleaguered, who so long kept field, but now must starve where he doth hide. That industry, who once the foe defied, lies slaughtered in the trenches. That the throng of idle fancies pipe their foolish song, where late the puissant captains fought and died. Thus to be humbled, 'tis to be undone, a forest felled, a city razed to ground, a cloak unsewn, unwoven, and unspun, till not a thread remains that can be wound. And yet, O lover, thee, the ruined one, love who hath humbled, thus hath also crowned. 34. I care not if I live, though life and breath have never been to me so dear and sweet. I care not if I die, for I could meet, being so happy, happily my death. I care not if I love, to-day she saith she loveth, and love's history is complete. Nor care I if she love me, at her feet my spirit bows entranced, and worshippeth. I have no care for what was most my care, but all around me see fresh beauty born, and common sights, grown lovelier than they were. I dream of love, and in the light of morn tremble, beholding all things very fair, and strong with strength, that puts my strength to scorn. 35. O my goddess divine, sometimes I say, now let this word for ever and all suffice. Thou art insatiable, and not yet twice can even thy lover give his soul away. And for my acts, that at thy feet I lay, for never any other by device of wisdom, love, or beauty could entice my homage to the measure of this day. I have no more to give thee. Lo, I have sold my life, have emptied out my heart, and spent whate'er I had, till, like a beggar, bold with naught to lose, I laugh, and am content. A beggar kisses thee, nay, love, behold, I fear not, thou too art in beggarment. 36. All earthly beauty hath one cause and proof, to lead the pilgrim soul to beauty above. Yet lieth the greater bliss so far aloof that few there be are weaned from earthly love. Joy's ladder it is, reaching from home to home, the best of all the work that all was good. Whereof 'twas writ the angel's eye upclomb, down sped, and at the top the Lord God stood. But I my time abuse, my eyes by day centred on thee, by night my heart on fire, letting my numbered moments run away, nor e'en twixt night and day to heaven aspire. So true it is that what the eye seeth not but slow is loved, and loved is soon forgot. 37. Already far have we sailed out to sea, enough have proved our bark, and hear the roar of tempest overnigh, that more and more rages and lightens on the whitened lee. See how with naked masts the tall ships flee like frighted phantoms from the dangerous shore, and not a boat contrives, with sail or oar, to stem the foundering waves. How then shall we? Now time it is to make for port, and haste in safety with the joy our perils earn. But let us bow that first the shrine be graced of Him who moves and draws all souls that yearn, with fair memorials of devotion placed for venturous voyage and for safe return. 38. The bliss that Adam lost, eating in haste, he lost not all, for what he had, and still his sons are born as pure and glad as he when first by God in Eden placed. But what he took for them, daring to taste, he won outright, whether for good or bad, and in his footsteps all must issue sad out of their garden, exiled and disgraced. And therefore knowledge hath two hands, with one pressed to her prisoned heart, that mourns and yearns, she guards her firstborn joy, and shares with none. But with her busy right she moves, and turns all tangible things, or, gazing on the sun, shades her adventurous eye, and ever learns. 39. O my life's mischief, once my heart's delight, that drewest a mortgage on my heart's estate, whose baneful clause is never out of date, nor can avenging time restore my right, whom first to lose sounded that note of spite whereto my doleful days were tuned by fate. That art the well-loved cause of all my hate, the sun whose wandering makes my hopeless night. Thou being in all my lacking all I lack. It is thy goodness turns my grace to crime, thy fleetness from my goal which holds me back. Wherefore my feet go out of step with time, my very grasp of life is old and slack, and even my passion falters in my rhyme. 40. At times, with hurried hooves and scattering dust, I race by field or highway, and my horse spare not, but urge direct in headlong course unto some fair far hill that gain I must. But near arrived the vision soon mistrust, rein in, and stand as one who sees the source of strong illusion, shaming thought to force from off his mind the soil of passion's gust. My brow I bare then, and with slackened speed can view the country pleasant on all sides, and to kind salutation give good heed. I ride as one who for his pleasure rides, and stroke the neck of my delighted steed, and seek what cheer the village inn provides. 41. An idle June day on the sunny Thames, floating or rowing, as our fancy led, now listening to sweet things the young birds said, and choosing now a nosegay from the gems that star the embroidery of the bank that hems the current that our skiff from Henley sped, to where the Clifton woods o'er Maidenhead bar its still surface with their mirrored stems. I would have life, thou saidst, as all this day, simple enjoyment, calm in its excess, with not a grief to cloud, and not a ray of passion over hot my peace to oppress, with no ambition to reproach delay, nor rapture to disturb its happiness. 42. Whether it be happiness to have enough, and fear no want while most are poorly fed, to bring untired limbs to an easy bed, while any workman's couch is cold and rough, and whether honour be of such dull stuff as likes the peace for which a brother bled, and virtue yet untried in comfort bred, can know her name, and feel no self-rebuff. Or if to yield themselves to worse and worse were truly solace for the hearts that chafe, since their nobility would choose the curse rather to be than once to ride the waif, or hear the laugh. O blame not my poor verse, that it is sad while comfort still is safe. 43. A man that sees by chance his picture, made as once a child he was, handling some toy, will gaze to find his spirit within the boy, yet hath no secret with the soul portrayed. He cannot think the simple thought which played upon those features, then so frank and coy. 'Tis his, yet oh, not his. And o'er the joy his fatherly pity bends in tears dismayed. Proud of his prime, may be, he stand at best, and lightly wear his strength, or aim it high, most master now of all he e'er possessed. Yet in the pictured face a charm doth lie, the one thing lost more worth than all the rest, which seeing he fears to say, "This child was I." 44. Tears of love, tears of joy, and tears of care, comforting tears that fell uncomforted, tears o'er the new-born, tears beside the dead, tears of hope, pride and pity, trust and prayer, tears of contrition, all tears whatsoe'er, of tenderness or kindness, had she shed who here is pictured, ere upon her head the fine gold might be turned to silver there. The smile that charmed the father hath given place unto the furrowed care wrought by the son, but virtue hath transformed all change to grace, so that I praise the artist who hath done a portrait for my worship of the face won by the heart, my father's heart that won. 45. If I could but forget and not recall so well my time of pleasure and of play, when ancient nature was all new and gay, light as the fashion that doth last enthrall. Ah, mighty nature! when my heart was small, nor dreamed what fearful searchings underlay the flowers and leafy ecstasy of May, the breathing summer sloth, the scented fall. Could I forget, then, were the fight not hard, pressed in the melee of accursed things, having such help in love and such reward, but that 'tis I who once, 'tis this that stings, once dwelt within the gate that angels guard, where yet I'd be had I but heavenly wings. End of section 3. Of the Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sonnets 46 to 60. 46. When I see childhood on the threshold seize the prize of life from age and likelihood, I mourn time's change that will not be withstood, thinking how Christ said, "Be like one of these." For in the forest, among many trees, scarce one in all is found that hath made good the virgin pattern of its slender wood, that courtesied in joy to every breeze. But scathed, but knotted trunks that raise on high their arms in stiff contortion, strained and bare, whose crowns in patriarchal sorrow sigh. So little children, ye, nay, nay, ye ne'er from me shall learn how sure the change and nigh, when ye shall share our strength, and mourn to share. 47. When parched with thirst, astray on sultry sands the traveller faints, upon his closing ear steals a fantastic music. He may hear the babbling fountain of his native land. Before his eyes the vision seems to stand, where at its terraced brink the maids appear, who fill their deep urns at its waters clear, and not refuse the help of lover's hand. Oh, cruel jest! He cries, as some one flings the sparkling drops in sport or show of ire. O shameless, O contempt of holy things! But never of their wanton play they tire, as not athirst they sit beside the springs, while he must quench in death his lost desire. 48. The image of thy love, rising on dark and desperate days above my sullen sea, wakens again fresh hope and peace in me, gleaming above upon my groaning bark. Whate'er my sorrow be, I then may hark a loving voice. Whate'er my terror be, this heavenly comfort still I win from thee to shine my lodestar, that wert once my mark. Prodigal nature makes us but to taste one perfect joy, which given, she niggard grows, and lest her precious gift should run to waste, adds to its loss 1,000 lesser woes. So to the memory of the gift that graced her graceless hand more grace bestows. 49. I will not marry thee, sweet hope, I said, for all thy beauty nor thy promise sworn. Though thou the dayspring pledge, and rosy morn already captive in thy train hast led, no clouded terror o'er the sun is spread, no noonday darkness like of love outworn, the cold star on his shining orbit borne with all his valleys dry, his verdure dead. Nor hast thou any power to thrust aside fate's cruel hand, nor any refuge shown where comfortless my widowed shame could hide. For me, in my cold sepulchre I'd groan, hearing men say, "See Hope, so late love's bride, whom now this vain ambition has made his own." 50. In this neglected, ruined edifice of works unperfected and broken schemes, where is the promise of my early dreams, the smile of beauty and the pearl of price? No charm is left now that could once entice wind-wavering fortune from her golden streams, and full in flight decrepit purpose seems trailing the banner of his old device. Within the house a frore and numbing air has chilled endeavour, sickly memories reign in every room, and ghosts are on the stair, and Hope behind the dusty window pane watches the days go by, and half aware forecasts her last reproach and mortal stain. 51. Once I would say, before thy vision came, my joy, my life, my love, and with some kind of knowledge speak and think I knew my mind of heaven and hope, and each word hit its aim. Whate'er their sounds be, now all mean the same, denoting each the fair I cannot find. Or if I say them, 'tis as one long blind forgets what sights they were he used to name. Now if men speak of love, 'tis not my love, nor are their hopes nor joys mine, nor the life they choose for praise the life I reckon of. Nay, though they turn from house and child and wife and self, and in the thought of heaven above hold, as do I, all mortal things at strife. 52. Since then 'tis only pity looking back, fear looking forward, and the busy mind will in one woeful moment more upwind than lifelong years unroll of bitter or black. What is man's privilege? His hoarding knack of memory with foreboding so combined, whereby he comes to dream he hath of kind the perpetuity which all things lack. Which but to hope is doubtful joy, to have being a continuance of what, alas, we mourn, and scarcely bear with to the grave, or something so unknown that it o'erpassed the thought of comfort, and the sense that gave cannot consider it through any glass. 53. Come, gentle sleep, I woo thee, come and take not now the child into thine arms, from fright composed by drowsy tune and shaded light, whom, ignorant of thee, thou didst nurse and make. Nor now the boy who scorned thee for the sake of growing knowledge or mysterious night, though with fatigue thou didst his limbs invite, and heavily weigh the eyes he strove to wake. No, nor the man severe, who from his best failing, alert fled to thee, that his breath, blood, force, and fire, should come at morn redressed. But me, from whom thy comfort tarrieth, for all my wakeful prayer sent without rest to thee, O show and shadow of my death. 54. Let man lament his lot, and then lament that he must so lament, and then complain that all his lamentations are in vain. His tears betray his true affections bent. For liefest love first falls to discontent, as they who best know health will rage at pain, and pine beyond their sickness to regain their treasure treasured most when lost or spent. Which being in them a dolour, none the less inspires the cries of prime. The truly sad are dumb, and they but on a happiness who hanker after joys that once they had, or surfeited of sweets, turn and confess their pleasure is to be no longer glad. 55. The spirit's eager sense for sad or gay filleth with what he will our vessel full. Be joy his bent, he waiteth not joy's day, but like a child at any toy will pull. If sorrow, he will mourn for fancy's sake, and spoil heaven's plenty with forbidden care. What fortune most denies we slave to take, nor can fate load us more than we can bear. And since in having pleasure disappeareth, he who hath least in hand hath most at heart while he can hope, as he who always feareth a grief that never comes hath still the smart. And worse than true is such unreal distress, for when God sendeth sorrow, it doth bless. 56. The world comes not to an end, her city hives swarm with the tokens of a changeless trade, with rolling wheel, driver and flagging jade, rich men and beggars, children, priests and wives, new homes on old are set as lives on lives, invention with invention overlaid. But still or tool, or toy, or book, or blade, shaped for the hand that holds and toils and strives. The men I meet work as their fathers wrought with little bettered means, for works depend on works and overlap, and thought on thought. And through all change the smiles of hope amend the weariest face, the same love changed in naught. In this thing too the world comes not to an end. 57. Since in the love of Christ my enterprise to do thee honour groweth day by day, and with the growth of love the words I say are daily worthier of thee and more wise, like a rich Jew I book my merchandise in fairest hand, and hoard my gains away, counting the hours ere I shall quite repay more than the full account against me lies. But not the joy. Alas, I in my grave shall be, and thou in thine, ere this befall. 'Tis but a memory my verse can save. Of this my wealth, too, if I give thee all, sorrow for pleasure pay I, and I crave a loan of time that flies beyond recall. 58. Oh, my uncared for songs, what are ye worth, that in my secret book with so much care I write you, this one here and that one there, marking the time and order of your birth? Now, with a fancy so unkind to mirth, a sense so hard, a style so worn and bare, look ye for any welcome anywhere from any shelf or heart-home on the earth? Should others ask you this, say then I yearned to write you such as once, when I was young, finding I should have loved and thereto turned. 'Twere something yet to live again among the gentle youth beloved, and where I learned my art be there remembered for my song. 59. Who takes the census of the living dead, ere the day come when memory shall o'ercrowd the kingdom of their fame, and for that proud and airy people find no room or stead? Ere hoarding time, that ever thrusteth back the fairest treasures of his ancient store, better with best confound, so he may pack his greedy gatherings closer, more and more? Let the true muse rewrite her sullied page, and purge her story of the men of hate, that they go dirgeless down to Satan's rage, with all else foul, deformed, and miscreate. She hath full toil to keep the names we love honoured on earth, as they are bright above. 60. I heard great Hector sounding war's alarms, where through the listless ghosts chiding he strode, as though the Greeks besieged his last abode, and he, his Troy's hope still, her king at arms. But on those gentle meads, where nothing harms, and purpose perishes, his passion glowed like the cold nightworm's candle, nor scarce showed the heart death kills not quite, nor Lethe charms. 'Twas plain to read, even by those shadows quaint, how rude catastrophe had dimmed his day, and blighted all his cheer with stern complaint. To arms! To arms! What more the voice would say was swallowed in the valleys, and grew faint upon the thin air, as he passed away. End of section 4. Five of the Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sonnets 61 to 79. 61. Since peace came down to me, I well know whence, O perfected and happy spirit, 'twas sped. And he who did lead me whither I was led, drawn by sweet airs and plaintive innocence. So lost when thou didst seem departing hence, I too enrolled myself among the dead, and left my home of homes unvisited, exiled from memory for my woe's defence. But see, the doors fast shut by grief and pride reopened. See, kind peace, returned in spite of this sad heart, which thee so long denied. For thou, my joy, whate'er, or day or night, I think or do, again art by my side, my lost and won, my treasure and life's delight. 62. Sweet sleep, dear unadorned bride of toil, whom in the dusk of night men's bodies low lie to receive, and thy loved coming know, closing the cloudy gate on day's turmoil. Thou through the soft ways enterest to despoil the ready spirit, and on worn flesh bestow such comfort as through trembling souls will flow when God's well done doth all their sins assoil. Thought looseth at thy touch her troubled hold, hand, eye, and ear fail, and the world's fair show is blotted clean. Or then thou mayst unfold, brightening the hours of sure renewal slow, thy careless pageantries, pictures untold, joys which the tasking sun melteth like snow. 63. Since not the enamoured sun with glance more fond kisses the foliage of his sacred tree, then doth my waking thought arise on thee, loving none near thee, like thee, nor beyond. Nay, since I am sworn thy slave, and in the bond is writ my promise of eternity, since to such high hope thou'st encouraged me, that if thou look but from me I despond. Since thou'rt my all in all, oh think of this, think of the dedication of my youth, think of my loyalty, my joy, my bliss. Think of my sorrow, my despair and ruth, my sheer annihilation if I miss. Think, if thou shouldst be false, think of thy truth. 64. These meagre rhymes, which a returning mood sometimes o'errateth, I as oft despise, And knowing them ill-natured, stiff, and rude, see them as others with contemptuous eyes. Nay, and I wonder less at God's respect for man, a minim jot in time and space, than at the soaring faith of his elect, that gift of gifts, the comfort of his grace. O work unsearchable! O heavenly love, most infinitely tender, so to touch the work that we can meanly reckon of! Surely, I say, we are favoured overmuch. But of this wonder what doth most amaze is that we know our love is held for praise. 65. Beauty sat with me all the summer day, awaiting the sure triumph of her eye. Nor marked I till we parted how, hard by, Love in her train stood ready for his prey, she as too proud to join herself the fray, trusting too much to her divine ally, when she saw victory tarry chid him, why dost thou not at one stroke this rebel slay? Then generous Love, who holds my heart in fee, told of our ancient truce. So from the fight we straight withdrew our forces, all the three. Baffled, but not disheartened, she took flight, scheming new tactics. Love came home with me, and prompts my measured verses as I write. 66. In autumn moonlight, when the white air wan is fragrant in the wake of summer hence, 'tis sweet to sit entranced, and muse thereon in melancholy and godlike indolence. When the proud spirit, lulled by mortal prime to fond pretence of immortality, vieweth all moments from the birth of time, all things whate'er have been or yet shall be. And like the garden where the year is spent, the ruin of old life is full of yearning, mingling poetic rapture of lament with flowers and sunshine of spring's sure returning. Only in visions of the white air wan, by godlike fancy seized and dwelt upon. 67. When first I saw thee, dearest, if I say the spells that conjure back the hour and place, and evermore I look upon thy face, as in the spring of years long passed away, no fading of thy beauty's rich array, no detriment of age on thee I trace, but time's defeat written in spoils of grace, robbed from the rivals thou didst pity and slay. So hath thy growth been, thus thy faith is true, unchanged in change, still to my growing sense, to life's desire the same, and nothing new. But as thou wert in dream and prescience at love's arising, now thou stand'st to view in the broad noon of his magnificence. 68. 'Twas on the very day winter took leave of those fair fields I love, when to the skies the fragrant earth was smiling in surprise at that her heaven-descended quick reprieve, I wandered forth, my sorrow to relieve, yet walked amid sweet pleasure in such wise as Adam went alone in paradise, before God of his pity fashioned Eve. And out of tune with all the joy around, I laid me down beneath a flowering tree, and all my senses crept, a sleep profound, in which it seemed that thou wert given to me, rending my body where with hurried sound I feel my heart beat when I think of thee. 69. Love that I know, love I am wise in, love, my strength, my pride, my grace, my skill untaught, my faith here upon earth, my hope above, my contemplation and perpetual thought, the pleasure of my fancy, my heart's fire, my joy, my peace, my praise, my happy theme, the aim of all my doing, my desire of being, my life by day, by night my dream. Love, my sweet melancholy, my distress, my pain, my doubt, my trouble, my despair, my only folly and unhappiness, and in my careless moments still my care. O love, sweet love, earthly love, love divine, say'st thou to-day, O love, that thou art mine? 70. The dark and serious angel, who so long vexed his immortal strength in charge of me, hath smiled for joy and fled in liberty to take his pastime with the peerless throng. Oft had I done his noble keeping wrong, wounding his heart to wonder what might be God's purpose in a soul of such degree, and there he had left me but for mandate strong. But seeing thee with me now, his task at close he knoweth, and wherefore he was bid to stay, and work confusion of so many foes. The thanks he looks to have from me I pay, yet fear some heavenly envy as he goes unto what great reward I cannot say. 71. Though others love thee less, I will stand true, nor can it be that I should ever leave thee. Thou knowest my heart, and if it could deceive thee, it would not wrong thee thus as others do. I spend the day telling my vows anew, and hold my courage ready lest I grieve thee, and count my words lest chance offence bereave thee of one poor sheep out of thy flock, so few. And call on thee, my Lord, my strength, my stay, that if I faint or fall, thou wilt restore me, and feed me with fresh comfort day by day. Nay, though it be thy terrors all pass o'er me, lo, I will fear no evil, for I say, surely thy grace will be sufficient for me. 72. I will be what God made me, nor protest against the bent of genius in my time. That science of my friends robs all the best, while I love beauty and was born to rhyme. Be they our mighty men, and let me dwell in shadow among the mighty shades of old, with love's forsaken palace for my cell, whence I look forth and all the world behold, and say, these better days, in best things worse, this bastardy of time's magnificence, will mend in fashion and throw off the curse to crown new love with higher excellence. Cursed though I be to live my life alone, my toil is for man's joy, his joy my own. 73. I live on hope, and that I think do all who come into this world, and since I see myself in swim with such good company, I take my comfort whatsoe'er befall. I abide and abide, and if more stout and tall my spirit would grow by waiting like a tree, and clear of others' toil, it pleaseth me in dreams their quick ambition to forestall. And if through careless eagerness I slide to some accomplishment, I give my voice still to desire, and in desire abide. I have no stake abroad. If I rejoice in what is done or doing, I confide neither to friend nor foe my secret choice. 74. Ye blessed saints that now in heaven enjoy the purchase of those tears the world's disdain, doth love still with his war your peace annoy, or hath death freed you from his ancient pain? Have ye no springtide, and no burst of May in flowers and leafy trees, when solemn night pants with love music, and the holy day breaks on the ear with songs of heavenly light? What make ye, and what strive for? Keep ye thought of us, or in new excellence divine is old forgot? Or do ye count for naught what the Greek did and what the Florentine? We keep your memories well. O in your store live not our best joys treasured evermore? 75. Ah, heavenly joy! But who hath ever heard, who hath seen joy, or who shall ever find joy's language? There is neither speech nor word, naught but itself to teach it to mankind. Scarce in our 20,000 painful days we may touch something, but there lives, beyond the best of art, or nature's kindest phase, the hope whereof our spirit is fain and fond. The cause of beauty given to man's desires, writ in the expectancy of starry skies, the faith which gloweth in our fleeting fires, the aim of all the excellence we prize, which but to love, pursue, and pray for well maketh earth heaven, and to forget it hell. 76. My wearied heart, whenever, after all, its loves and yearnings shall be told complete, when gentle death shall bid it cease to beat, and from all dear illusions disenthrall. However then thou shalt appear to call my fearful heart, since down at others' feet it bade me kneel so oft, I'll not retreat from thee, nor fear before thy feet to fall. And I shall say, receive this loving heart which erred in sorrow only, and in sin took no delight, but being forced to part from thee, without thee hoping thee to win, most prized what most thou madest as thou art on earth, till heaven were open to enter in. 77. Dreary was winter, wet with changeful sting of clinging snowfall and fast flying frost, and bitterer north winds then withheld the spring that dallied with her promise till 'twas lost. A sunless and half-hearted summer drowned the flowers in needful and unwelcomed rain, and autumn with a sad smile fled uncrowned from fruitless orchards and unripened grain. But could the skies of this most desolate year in its last month learn with our love to glow, men yet should rank its cloudless atmosphere above the sunsets of 5 years ago. Of my great praise, too, part should be its own, now reckoned peerless for thy love alone. 78. Away now, lovely muse, roam and be free. Our commerce ends for aye, thy task is done. Though to win thee I left all else unwon, thou whom I most have won art not for me. My first desire, thou too foregone must be. Thou too, O much lamented, now though none will turn to pity thy forsaken son, nor the divine sisters will weep for thee. None will weep for thee. Thou return, O Muse, to thy Sicilian fields. I once have been on thy loved hills, and where thou first didst use thy sweetly balanced rhyme, unthankful queen, have plucked and wreathed thy flowers, but do thou choose some happier brow to wear thy garlands green. 79. Eternal Father, who didst all create, in whom we live, and to whose bosom move, to all men be thy name known, which is Love, till its loud praises sound at heaven's high gate. Perfect thy kingdom in our passing state, that here on earth thou mayst as well approve our service as thou ownest theirs above, whose joy we echo, and in pain await. Grant body and soul each day their daily bread, and should, in spite of grace, fresh woe begin, even as our anger soon is past and dead, be thy remembrance mortal of our sin. By thee in paths of peace thy sheep be led, and in the vale of terror comforted. End of section 5. End of The Growth of Love by Robert Bridges. Recording by Algy Pug.